Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I am going to be covering a topic that I feel is very widely discussed and debated, and that is what is the best optic setup to choose from when it comes to magnified optics on your setup. So bottom line up front, I think that best is subjective and that it is really going to be dependent. Your choice is going to be dependent on the intended usage of the gun and also hugely on user preference. I'm only going to talk the options that I have experience with. I know there's many different options out there, but I also feel that there's some really generalized points between all the different options. I know there's many different opinions out there, so I'm just going to be sharing mine, and it's going to be, a bit biased on what I like and what I don't like. So please just keep that in mind. To summarize my experience, for the vast majority of my years shooting, it has always been with either dots of various different manufacturers or holographic weapon sights, mainly being the EOTech, though I did also have a Vortex Huey. Um, didn't really jump into magnifiers till just a few years ago. Started that off with the Holosun offering, and then the Trijicon MRO 3X mag, and then got into the G33s. And then you see is over here I have the Aimpoint 3X mag. LPVO wise, I did have a really old LPVO a couple years ago, and that was the Millet DMS1. It was a 1:4 power variable optic. I never used it on anything outside of my Smith & Wesson 1522. I guess I liked it enough. I didn't really put a whole lot of attention to it. And then just last year, about midway through the year, maybe third quarter, I ended up picking up a Sigtagno MSR 1:6 LPVO. Did a review on that, or a comparison at least, between that and the next LPVO that I picked up, which was the Vortex Viper PST Gen 2 1:6. And then very shortly after that, I ended up picking up the Vortex Razor Gen 2 1:6 E model. So all the information that I'm going to share here, along with my opinion, is going to be based on my own personal experience with these optics in general. So starting off, let's go with the capability. So I'm not going to go into too much detail in this one, as capability is really dependent on the user. It is also dependent on the top end power of the LPVO. Obviously, if you have a 3X mag, a 5X mag, those are fixed power. Even with the ACOG or other prism optics, those are fixed power as well. And then when it comes to LPVOs, like I mentioned, depending on whether the top end power is 4, 6, 8, or 10, it's obviously the higher magnification that you have is going to give you more capability. And then, touching base back onto the user capability, it's also, some people can shoot a 6 power scope out to 600 yards or more. Some people may be able to accurately make shots with iron sights with zero magnification out to that same distance. So that all said, I say that to say that what works for one person and what some people feel is a capable optic to them may not be capable to another person. So again, don't want to go too much into that because it is really dependent on the user itself. Next, talking about price. Price is definitely something that is considered by many gun owners and firearm enthusiasts. At the end of the day, you can only spend what you can spend. When it comes to something like the LPVOs, we'll start with wide range. That Sig Tango MSR that I mentioned, I think can be found for like $300. Um, Lots of reviews out there on that one. I would say that that should be considered your bare bottom cheapest LPVO that you should go with. And then you have other LPVOs. Again, depending on the power range, the Vortex Razor Gen 2E can be found for probably around $1,200, $1,300. The Viper PST Gen 2 can be found for about $600, or you could get something that like is the Night Force Attacker that's going to run you closer to $2,400, $2,800. So a lot of variation in price between the different ones, obviously, especially also with the red dots. Whether you have a $100 Sig Romeo, you have a $300 Holosun 515, or you have a $750 Aimpoint T2. A lot of variation in price there. And then also with the magnifiers. I want to say magnifiers in general run, let's say on average, about 600 bucks. So things to consider when you are pricing out a setup. You know, dots and magnifiers. They typically, excuse me, dots and holographic weapon sights. They typically come with a mount that's built in, or at least included with it. But you know that cost can greatly increase if you want different aftermarket mounts. If you want a Scholarworks mount or a Geisley mount or whatever it may be, you might as well tack on another $100, $150. If you want to go with a Unity setup, you know, you're going to be looking at about another $450 between the primary optic mount and the magnifier mount. Also, when it comes to LPVOs, while some come with the mount, most do not. The SIG Tango did come with a mount, but I will say the majority of them do not come with a mount. So, you know, you have to factor that in as well when it comes to the cost. With the LPVOs, you know, you can definitely find some bargain and budget-minded options out there, but considering that that is what mounts your primary sighting system on your gun, that is not something that you should go cheap out on. I feel that the Aero SPR at $70 is probably the bare minimum of what you should go with. But if you go with like a Badger Ordnance Condition 1 or a Geisley mount, you can expect to spend about an additional $300 for the mount. So, you know, that adds up. And if you want to go really Gucci and get like a Scholarworks, it's going to be 400 plus. Something else to consider is that if you do run an offset dot, you're going to have to get a separate mount for that, and that adds up as well. Even if you piggyback it and get aftermarket rings, that's definitely going to add up too. Um, Also with the Trijicon ACOG, you're going to be looking at roughly $1,000. Now that does come with the TA51 thumb screw mount, which is definitely it's plenty capable. But if you want to get an aftermarket mount, again, you're going to have to factor in over $100 into that one. So, you know, let's say ballpark holographic weapon sight, um, red dot being 650 bucks, along with a magnifier maybe being another 600 or 650 bucks. So, you know, there is $1,200 to $1,400 that you're going to end up spending on a red dot or holographic weapon sight, along with a magnifier, and that's not counting any other aftermarket mounts. The LPVO can obviously vastly vary very much depending on the primary optic itself, along with the mount, and then the ACOG is about a flat $1,000. Now talking about the weight. So, you know, an EOTech weighs about 11.2 ounces. The magnifier adds about 12.8, so you're looking at 24 ounces total. You can peel a few ounces, 3-4 ounces off that if you go with a red dot like the T2. But when it comes to an LPVO, you know, just looking at the Vortex Razor, you're looking at about 21 ounces. Mounts range between 6 and 7 ounces on top of that. So let's just say, you know, 27, 28 ounces in comparison to the 20 to 24 that you can get with a holographic weapon sight or red dot. And ACOG is a flat 16 ounces. So out of all of these, the ACOG is definitely the lightest, and you can absolutely feel that when you pick up the gun. Moving on to eye relief, this is where LPVOs definitely shine. For the most part, you get 4 inches plus or minus a couple thousandths there. Definitely a lot better than magnifiers or ACOGs. You know, it's pretty much well known that ACOGs, they have absolute garbage eye relief. Magnifiers kind of really follow suit with that. Now, something also though to consider, if you have a flip to center or flip to side magnifier mount, Once you get that out of the way, you have zero eye relief issues with a holographic weapon sight or a dot. Um, Along with that comes iBox. So what iBox is basically with, when you get behind a magnified optic, you have to have your eye perfectly centered in a space, around the optic, around the eyepiece, or it starts to get shadow to it. Um, with an LPVO, when you're at 1 power, you do have more generous eye relief. And, the Vortex Razor is definitely known to be one of the LPVOs that have a more generous eye relief. Different LPVO brands and powers, that can vary. Um, but when you are zoomed in the top power, so at 6, like I have with my Razor, it's very tight, very tight. It's also very tight with the magnifier. Now, the ACOG definitely has the best eye box with it, or the most generous eye box. They give that one the edge to the magnifier and the LPVO. But then again, something to consider. Same thing with eye relief. That once you switch that magnifier out of your view, you don't have to worry about any eye box whatsoever. So that's something really important to think about, especially when you're considering shooting from less than ideal positions. So it's easy when you're sitting at a bench or standing at the range. But if you are crouched down, or like say shooting from a VTAC target, it's going to, eye box is going to play a big factor into how well you're going to be able to get sight acquisition. So definitely something to keep in mind when it comes to choosing between these 3 optic setups. Now to talk about field of view. So what field of view is why you are looking through an optic, how much of an area that you can basically see. So ACOGs are they're known for their generous field of view. And when it comes to LPVOs and magnifiers, they are pretty similar. You do get slightly more at 100 yards. And again, I'm going to drop in some pictures of the various optics looking out the back of my house to a target that is about 214 yards away, to kind of give you a side-by-side comparison of what the different optic setups and their field of views look like. So usability at different ranges, or let's say more specifically, even talking about close quarters distances. Feel that a lot of people, you have guns to be able to defend your home, and depending on the size and layout of your house, some of these optics may do better than others. But just let's talk about close quarters. Obviously, if you have a magnifier, there's absolutely no worries. You can flip it out of the way. You have true 1 power view. With the LPVO, if you're zoomed into one, again, no issue outside of having to worry about eye box and eye relief. And when it comes to the ACOG, this is probably where you get the biggest weakness, because it is fixed at 4 power. You're going to have to utilize the bind and aiming concept. And what that basically is making sure that you are shooting both eyes open. So or for me, speaking of which, because I'm a lefty, while I'm looking through the ACOG with my left eye, I am mainly focusing my view with my right eye. And basically, it'll superimpose the reticle of the ACOG on top of your target. So it's definitely doable. It's been used a lot out there in the global war on terror, along with other things, or other theaters. It's definitely doable, but it's just something to keep in consideration. As far as durability goes, You know, the ACOG is an absolute tank. There's a really good video out there. I don't remember the name of the channel, but they had a super cool video where they just absolutely tortured an ACOG and it still went and just ran. Aimpoint T2s, you know, they have definitely shown to be bomb proof as also. EOTechs are widely used by different military and police, and while they are durable, I think it would probably be very well agreed upon that they are less durable than something like a T2, definitely less durable than ACOG. LPVOs, I feel that this is where the weakness is. So, you know, depending on the model and brand of the LPVO that you get, there's definitely they're going to be more fragile than a red dot or a holographic weapon sight. And on top of that, there are more failure points. You have scope caps that you have to worry about. Obviously, all the different adjustments inside the scope. There's just definitely more risk that something could be rattled by very violent usage. Now to discuss the reticle. So there are different red dots on holographic weapon sights that have some BDC points built into them. I know specifically with the EX or EOTech um, -2 options that I have, besides having the donut of death in the center dot, there is a dot below that that is calibrated for a 14.5-inch barrel and is supposed to be right on with 400 yards. That is one video that there's a YouTube channel. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. It's something like Mag's Mullet America or something like that. He did an awesome video showing that the BDC marks on the EOTechs definitely are pretty much well on. There are red dots out there also, various offerings from SIG that have multiple reticles with BDC holdovers. But not all of them have them. The Aimpoints don't have any versions available. So you have 0 reference points for BDC holdover and LPVOs. That is one, you know, that is many different options out there that are available. Definitely give the edge to LPVOs when it comes to that. Um, you know, and also their usage of them can depend on whether you're looking through a second focal plane or a first focal plane LPVO. And piggybacking off the reticle options, let's talk about the daylight brightness of the different offerings. So obviously red dots and holographic weapon sights are very much so daylight bright. A lot of adjustability on that one. And there is typically no issue. Obviously, if you have a cheaper dot, some red dots may not necessarily be absolute daylight bright. But just speaking of LPVOs, there are very few options out there that are absolutely daylight bright. The Vortex Razor 1-6 is considered one of them that are daylight bright. And I will say, in comparison to like a T2, me being in the sunny state of Florida and going out in broad daylight, you can see the Vortex Razor reticle decently, but you cannot get it as bright as like the T2 can go. And the Viper PST 1-6, the reticle is not as bright as the Razor. But something to keep in mind though is that LPVOs have etched glass, so even if it's not daylight bright or if your battery goes dead, you still have a reticle that's etched onto the glass that you will be able to use it with. You know, if your battery goes dead in your dot or holographic weapon sight, you're basically screwed. So unless you have backup iron sights or a secondary optic, you're going to be SOL. Speaking of which, batteries, you know, depending on the offering that's out there, there are options with the red dots, with the ACOGs, and with the LPVOs. But let me backtrack real quick and talk about the ACOG. You know, I kind of skipped over it with the reticle and the daylight bright. ACOGs are offered with different offerings. You know, whether it be the chevron, whether it be the donut of death or the circle dot, and also with their 5.56 reticle. They do have range finding capabilities on them, but again, they're going to be specified for a certain round and a certain barrel length. And then when it comes to the battery life, The most well-known ACOG has the fiber optic strip along with tritium. That can be a pro or that can be a con. You see over in the global war on terror, full sun can make the reticle too bright, so a lot of people put tape over it. Though Schaefer Machining uh, does have a new product available right now where they have developed a cover that gives you some variability in how much you want that fiber optic cord available, allowing you be able to adjust how much light is getting into that. But also there are ACOGs out there along with other prism scopes that do operate off battery, so you don't have to necessarily rely on how bright it's going to be depending on the available light that the optic is sitting in. So that's definitely something to consider as well. So getting back to the battery and all three of them, depending on which optic you have, most holographic, or I should say all holographic weapon sights run on CR123 batteries. Um, a lot of dots run on CR2032s, though there are some AA and AAA offerings. And that's the same with LPVOs. The majority of them run on CR2032s, but if you have something like a VCOG, that's going to run on a AA battery. Also, when it comes to LPVOs and battery life, they are pretty short. Not a lot of them advertise how long the runtime will be, but they are probably definitely shorter than a holographic weapon sight, and definitely amongst many of the red dots that are available in the market today that have a 50,000 hour life. Now, the capabilities of them, again, capability is going to be really dependent on the top end power, and also user preference. Speaking of bulk wise now, the ACOG is going to be the smallest and lightest of the package overall. Least bulkiest. The holographic or red dot with magnifier is going to be about middle. And LPVOs definitely have the bulkiest size overall. They feel the bulkiest. They look the bulkiest. And again, that is dependent on which model LPVO you choose, but generally they are all very similar in size. And if you throw a offset or a piggybacked red dot on top of that, it's going to add even more bulk to it. So, lastly, cool factor. All of them, in their own regards and respects, definitely have their own cool factor to them. And besides usability, everybody wants to be cool or look cool. So to wrap this video up, I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. What is the best choice? Again, very, very dependent on what the intended usage of the gun is, along with the user preference to it. What works for some may not work for other, or what one man's trash is another man's treasure. So there is no best. It is subjective. My best advice to you is to get your hands on as many different optic choices and options out there, and see what does work for you. And then you'll be able to decide for yourself, depending on the what's going to work for you and your purposes, how you're going to use it, and then find out or figure out what you feel is going to be best. So for me personally, I definitely prefer the EOTech for the majority of my choices. I do feel that it is super fast. The larger viewing glass definitely helps make for faster shooting. But I used to say that if I could only choose one optic setup, that it would be the Trijicon ACOG TA31 with a top-mounted or offset red dot. But that said, now that I've gotten into LPVOs a bit, if I had to choose just one, I would probably go with the LPVO, along with an offset dot. Some people may look at this and say that having a offset or a piggyback mounted dot on a LPVO is pointless. Works for me. I like it. Especially if you're zoomed in at higher power and then you need to make a quick close-up snapshot. Um, it's definitely a good options. Plus, if your primary optic goes down, you do have a backup option. Also, as you see on this gun here, this upper, I do also have iron sights, so super duper redundant. So anyway, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope that it helps some people out, possibly make a decision on what's going to work for them. Definitely, again, appreciate all the subscribers that I've gotten up to this point. Also all the feedback that I've gotten and received as well. I definitely love chatting with every one of you. So that is about it. If you like the content that I provide here, please hit the like and subscribe button, and please share my videos as well. Have a good one.